So Tim Persons was describing to us a strategic vision for standards in the financial sector. Let's now talk about the plain but critical facts. I think Corinna Turbes has established herself as the explainer in chief for the FDTA, and she's now going to explain it to us. Her organization, the Data Foundation, was the group with the foresight, ambition, and leadership to get FDTA teed up and ultimately passed, and it did so at the helm of a coalition of other standards and financial groups, including OMG. Corinna is the policy director at the Data Foundation, where she supports the organization's mission of improving society through data. In her role, she works closely with members of the Data Foundation and Data Coalition to bring expertise and insight to Congress and the executive branch on how to improve financial data. This included working closely with stakeholders on the passage of the Financial Data Transparency Act and continuing to work to ensure successful implementation of the bill. Thanks to the Data Foundation for sharing Corinna with us. Corinna, please come on up and tell us what we need to know about the Financial Data Transparency Act of 2022.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of getting the Financial Data Transparency Act actually passed through Congress, which I will be very upfront with you. I am also not a standards guy, and neither is most of Congress. So this has always been a little bit of a challenge. So I will talk a little bit about what the final bill looks like, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we get there. So as David mentioned, the FDTA was originally the vision of Sir Hudson Foster, right? He wanted to make sure that the reporting of our financial data was not continued to be locked away in PDFs, right? This was a challenge for regulators. It was a burden for entities reporting in. It was just not a great way. So he proposed adopting a data standard for these regulated entities, including a legal entity identifier and available under the standard. So the final version of the bill, these are the affected agencies. That they are the Financial Stability Oversight Council agencies minus the CFTC, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's important. But these agencies are directed to issue a joint rule that will allow them to adopt data standards that apply to the information that these institutions are already collecting. So the FDTA is not asking for any new information or any new statutory requirements for information being reported. It simply applies to what is already reported. So there will be a joint rulemaking. I'll talk a little bit about why that is, but all of these agencies will have to issue one rule in about 2 years that adopts the standard, and then each subsequent agency will have to issue their own rule for their particular data collections. So for all of the information entity, for example, that goes to all of the agencies, there will be this joint rule initially, and then subsequently, individual agencies will have to have an interoperable data standard for their individual data collection, and that is, another 2 years. So we're looking at about a 4-year implementation timeline, which we will acknowledge is very tight. That is a tight timeline and will require a lot of engagement from community stakeholders, consensus groups like this. So the bill goes through and defines data standards as common non-proprietary legal entity identifier, that the data standards be machine readable, interoperable, and available in an open license. These are all concepts that are defined elsewhere in the U.S. Code, particularly the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. And then there is a provision that these public data assets are available as government data assets. Again, a very important part here is that no new data will be. This is not, so for all of the privacy concerns, confidential business information, all of these things are also addressed in this. It does not make anything that wasn't public before publicly consistent in that. And here it is again. Here's the actual language in the bill about no new reporting. No new data collections, no new publications. Everything stays the same. This is really about how information gets reported in rather than what particular information gets. So a little bit of the background. This was actually originally proposed as part of the Dots Bill. So 2008, and we are now 15 years this took. So it was a long road, right? But one of the things that's really great about this is it always had bipartisan support. We always had a Republican co-sponsor, a Democratic co-sponsor. Daryl Issa was the original Republican co-sponsor. Was the ultimate Republican co-sponsor. The finish line in the House side. He was joined by Representative. So this bill really started out in the House. Then it was called the Financial Transparency Act, introduced as a standalone bill. The original bill had included the CFTC. And last Congress, in the 2017 Congress, we were starting to get a lot of momentum. One of the challenges with the CFTC, however, is that it's under a different committee of jurisdiction. So it is technically covered by the Agriculture Committee rather than the Financial Services Committee. So when that happens, there is usually an additional hearing. There are 4 more leaders that you have to, well, ranking member and chairman that you have to get in. It makes things much more. So there was a tactical choice made to eliminate the CFTC from this. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversation about this, and one of the reasons why is because the CFTC, still a part of the FSA, has the ability to adopt these standards even if it's not explicitly. They also have done a lot of work to work towards adopting a legal entity identifier. So given the sort of leadership that existed at the CFTC, the challenge with the political reality of having multiple committees of jurisdiction, we ultimately made the choice to concede to the staffers' sort of recommendation that CFTC be. This bill is not intended to exclude the CFTC in any way. It's an important part of this, and we believe that they will be engaged in the process. So we ended up getting the FTA, Financial Transparency Act, as it was passed the House as a standalone bill. It had almost 900 yes votes, or I'm sorry, 400 yes votes at a double minimum, which is really great. It's a tremendous amount of bipartisan. Once that happened, there was a move from the agencies being covered to take it a bit more seriously, to look at it a little bit more in depth. And so that is when we started getting technical advice from the XM agencies, the agencies who would be affected and wanting to make some changes. With that technical advice from the agencies, we were able to go to the Senate side. And we had some really energetic staffers, particularly out of Senator office, who really engaged and were great partners in this. Took very seriously the technical advice, worked very closely with stakeholders and partners to understand how to make this bill be as effective as we wanted it to be. And so with that, some of the agencies here were concerned about the rulemaking process. The Financial Transparency Act, the House passed version, had subsequent rulemaking. So the Treasury would issue the first rule, and then the other agencies would then issue rules to affect their legal selection. This was envisioned to be originally a collaborative process. When we wrote the bill, we wanted all of the SF agencies to work together, but we thought it would expedite the process to have Treasury issue that initial rule that adopted promulgated these standards. The Federal Reserve, a few other agencies who are very conservative, rightfully so, with their independence, were worried that the intention of being collaborative isn't enough. They wanted it explicitly written in the bill that there would be a joint rulemaking process. And so that is why we have the joint rule and then the subsequent rule of the individual agencies adopting their standards for their data collections. So that, unfortunately, the legislative language required what looks like a significant amount of rewriting. If you were to ever want to compare the House version versus the Senate version, they look very different because of this sort of technical change in the legislative language, but the intention is still very much the same. And so once we got it sort of passed in the Senate, we got everybody on board. It became a part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a must-pass bill, often referred to as a Christmas tree bill, because they have to pass it, so everybody throws everything onto it, and it's sort of a free-for-all, but kind of fun. So they were able to pass it not only in the Senate as a part of the NDAA, but also in the House version as a part of the NDAA. So from there, bada bing, bada boom, it's now a law, which is really great to see. I really want to thank the congressional leaders, Carolyn Maloney, Patrick Henry in the House, especially stayed with this bill for a long time, and it was one of Carolyn Maloney's priorities as she left Congress. Our Senate staffers, especially, were so engaged in this process, and these are not necessarily conflicts that come easily to policymakers, right? There is always a narrative of assuming the data will be there, and helping members of Congress, helping policymakers understand that there is so much that goes into making sure our data is accessible, is usable, is timely, is a lot of work. And to be honest, I don't understand all the inner workings of it, but I know that it requires consensus standards. I know it requires convenings like this, and I know that it requires connecting what data we are looking for to our policy outcomes. And so being able to make that connection to see the danger in not having readily accessible data, especially on our financial markets, can be a real danger. So will be a continuing, ongoing process to make sure that the funding for the agencies responsible for adopting a data standard is not something that you can just do, right? There's careful, thoughtful research that goes in. There's going to need to be funding for that. So the Data Foundation and our coalition will be working with Congress to make sure that there's appropriate funding, to be making sure that there's appropriate engagement with our stakeholders going forward, so that this becomes something that really improves the data, financial regulatory data, rather than just another check the box exercise, another regulatory burden. This is something that can actually improve our financial regulation. So I will put this up here for now. Shameless self-promotion, but if you have ideas in particular about implementation of the financial data transparency, important questions that you want to see, I encourage you to email us there, because we are assembling these questions that we can take to regulators, that we can take to Congress to this. We have a fact sheet up on this, and we also have a RegTech data summit coming up on April 11th that will allow us to do a quick through these, have these conversations again, and appreciate OMG's support in this. And that was kind of a quick rundown of a very long process. So I'm happy to take questions. I will see how I can from the audience online to make sure that I'm not ignoring them. And any questions in the group?
Great, thank you very, very much. This is kind of like schoolhouse rock for financial standards. That was really good. How things are excessively complicated process. That was great result. So you guys, I saw some names.
Hi. So, could you talk a little bit about the scope of the securities that would be subject to this, and the agencies that are involved, in terms of who would be responsible for implementing this when the rules?
Oh, sure. So my understanding is that any existing data collection of any of those covered agencies will be subject to the Financial Data Transparency Act. So Treasury, SEC, FDIC, Federal Reserve, all of those folks. Originally, when the bill was attempted to be put into Dodd-Frank, there was an intention to have an exemption for smaller entities, which in the end is why it did not. So there is no explicit exemption for smaller entities. However, there will be a rolling implementation timeframe. So there isn't an expectation that smaller banks, smaller municipalities aren't expecting necessarily to flip a switch at the 2-year mark. There will be a sort of a rolling timeframe based on size of the entity. The specifics of that are still up in the air, and I think will be included in the federal. So I should mention, when they issue a rule, there will be first of all, an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking that will allow folks to get a chance to look at what it is. It will be an official registered comment period. Typically, they give 90 days to respond. That is not always written in stone. And so that would be the point that I think would be really important to talk about the implementation and the rollout, especially in the scoping document and the implementation, especially around cost versus recommendations.
Thank you. Go ahead, another question.
There any state already to well the center the trail feedings. Someone must have already had a vision of what they think it's going to look like. And has anyone tried to get some drafting of that? This is the agencies, they all work together. So there's no change in this reporting. Maybe the Securities and Exchange Commission has 1,000 attributes that they're following, right? And then if the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection may have another 500, is it like taking address? Everyone agrees that this data on their reporting was address and they all get the 60 digits. And is that the level of detail that they're expecting to get you out of this? Is that everyone agrees on this language, usage, what each field holds at every report?
And for the data elements that they yes, I believe so. Is that for example, address and entity, right? For these really basic ones, is that it is at least interoperable across the agencies, right? The example here is really the Vernon Madoff, right? It's all of these entities that he had. Those data standards, those data collections, this regulatory information is not able to talk to each other. So even if it may not be explicitly the same, alphanumeric format, that at least they can, in a machine readable way, translate between each other. And so that is the first 2-year rulemaking period for those data elements that all these agencies are building in. And then, the individualized ones for the SEC, CFTC, CFPB, be then interoperable with that data standard. I would point you to the Office of Financial Research. They have a pretty good paper that sort of lays out the case for this. John Bottega is the author of that. He has a pretty good sort of summary of where this is planning to go. But I don't want to make it seem like the vision for this is easy. That I don't think anyone is assuming that this is going to be easy, right? This is going to take a lot of time and effort. And one of the pieces that we heard when we were passing this bill is 2 years is not enough time. And so I want to be really clear-eyed about how they've been asked and how short a time frame that is. And so that is part of why, sort of the explainer in chief joke is I'm on a whirlwind tour to really urge folks to get involved and to really think about how to get to that end state and what it does look like in a way that both improves regulatory functions and reduces.
Yes, it was, even though they rule or they have they already have the line and then they're just hoping the agencies go online to them.
Yeah. That may be the case, but because it is sort of a project in a way, I think the federal reserve in particular is sensitive to this, of how they sort of observe that. And so hopefully it will. I don't think they are hoping the agency comes to a particular thing. I think
Well, thank you for that question. It's kind of like the end state, the other alternatives, like they give you the end state, they don't tell you, we're getting the resources to be able to get there. And it's an exploration. That's great. Thank you very much for the question. So let me guess it.
And the standard process to sausage making. I think we probably something small. And I'm just wondering if you have a sense of what the joint sausage making for this might look like. And multiple agencies, possibly multiple standards, which mean multiple controls. And we have to get together with this. And we have what else?
Not in sort of practical terms. I think we kind of talk about generally the rulemaking process. I am as a legal rely to serve as this process. However, there has been a push in recent years to improve stakeholder engagement through various means. The actual, I think, sausage to kind of borrow will be up in the air. So we don't necessarily know what we are looking at right now. We're still waiting to see who agencies this is getting assigned to, right? That is still a question that we don't know. Will it be CDOs? Will it be the OFR? Who is going to do this? And they don't know that yet. So that doesn't really well predict. But so that is kind of what our organization is doing, is sort of touching base and making sure that we are engaged in that and that we can communicate it out so that through official channels like the federal register, people are prepared, not caught unaware, and they can't necessarily attributing any sort of that it doesn't drop on December 2022. There's ways to keep meaningful engagement going, but legally with a joint rule, how it works is every agency will publish through the register. So there'll be multiple things.
That was a great explanation of the complexity that has to be faced. I think we all need to understand that complexity, both to manage our expectations, but also to figure out what the standards set as data definition and others in order to be helpful in running encouragement, shall I say.
Yes, this will be this will be a tough process. It will be tough on regulated entities too. So I think keeping the vision in mind of having interoperable machine readable data is really important, right? To know that what these benefits will be, to keep that motivation up. This will be a hard process. I don't want to make any bones about it. It's going to be hard. It will be.
So let's not go online. I believe Mark Marchaki will be a member of the coming panel.
Yes.
That's a question for you. Mark, can you hear me? Please unmute and ask your question.
He's not a.
Sorry about that. Yes, hi, Corinna. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about the funding. Is this something that's going to occur during the budget process that the Congress is starting right now, or would you see it in a future year?
Yeah, so a little bit about the kind of budget process. The president's budget request was just released. When they had started writing this budget, the FDTA had not. So that is just a symptom of having a very large organization. So we don't necessarily see support for it in the administration's budget. That's not a challenge necessarily, given the timing. What we as advocates are doing is working to make sure that Congress knows that this is a priority. It is hard to know where exactly the funding should go because, again, we don't have the office, right? Who is going to be in charge? Where should this money go? So I will just let you know that through our sort of advocacy networks, our coalition, we are talking with Congress to make sure that there is what's called report language in the appropriations bill to ensure that the agencies responsible know that Congress is invested, Congress is still watching, encouraging them to spend the money in this way. So I do not expect there for this budget cycle for there to be an explicit implementation funding line for FDTA, but there are other ways we can do that. We tag funding to encourage funding for chief data officers, for example, this language. So trying to set expectations for this round, I don't see anything explicit for them, but it is something that the data coalition is having active conversations about.
Thanks.
Thanks, and that gets us right into a couple of us in the room have been through that kind of rodeo before. It's a bit crazy.
And never the same thing twice.
No, we can see the outline and confidence in getting data foundation and all those data things. We need to try and get it to the right place. We have one more question.
Can you, are there any consequences of not
Legally, you have to go to jail over it. The consequences are, I think, in respect of implementation, right? Losing momentum, losing interest. These are sort of like those sort of soft challenges with not having, you know, when we talked about the timing. Folks wanted to have it be 4 years from first school, and that then becomes a you can slow it if you want that it's going to be. So I would say that the consequences are the emphasis, the need, the energy around it starts to wane. People then, you know, don't want to give it their all. Right? It's kind of drags on. So those are the real consequences. Whether or not we certainly would not ask for funding cut if they have stick measures in that. There could be, say, they are very that might be an opportunity for over 10 years. But it's not like the sort of statutory removal.
Thank you for the question. And I mean, that's an important issue, right? Because there are acts that were passed in the mid things like Great Act, you know, which are really, really important, but the implementation never occurred. They're still on the books, right? No one went to jail. No one probably, you know, got the unpaid day for not completing it. But how we, all work together to build the environment to want to, to want to complete these agency by agency as well as collectively.
Yeah, we could even go back to the Data Act. I'm sure there's still guidance on the books that we are missing. So, and that's another plug. We'll say this again and again for the community to get engaged. Keeping up that sustained interest is really important.
So, yes, it's a color interoperability. Right, the interoperability among the agency data taxonomies and ontologies and list of terms is what's in next year around. It's called for explicitly as well as reuse of data tags and definitions. I think interoperability will be in this case. And common models, common definitions. Will there be a predetermined phase for interoperability, like one agency will be the goal against which it will go, or the sheet coming out from OFR or somewhere else? Do you think it's going to work out? What are people thinking about it?
So I would say that the one agency leading is probably not the vision. And I think that is what we were to have their independence. They don't want to hear Treasury telling them what their data standard is. And that's sort of why we're in this joint rulemaking suit. I would say, and again, as a non-technical person, as a policy person, right? How do we connect our data functions to our policy outcomes? Interoperability, I think, in the way that Congress is thinking about it, the way that policymakers are thinking about it, is what helps the regulators do their jobs better. We don't want data to that, we have a policy scheme happening, and because the SEC cannot talk to the FDIC, that we miss it for another 10 years. Millions of people, or millions of dollars are lost in pensions because of it. So when we're thinking about interoperability, we're thinking about what allows for timeliness, what allows for accuracy. How do we translate that data in a way that makes sense, that reduces errors, and allows the regulators to do their jobs better. Also, so that regulated entities aren't submitting the same information, faxing to SEC, faxing to FDTA again and again. That there could, conceivably be a single reporting stream for regulated entities. Eventually, I don't know, of course, but so I'm talking about the vision for interoperability, and this is that's what we want to be able to do with it. That it creates a functional data infrastructure for regulators, for the folks who use the publicly available data to inform their business decision. That when there's a crisis, bankers can make good decisions based on what information is coming out, and it's happened in a way where we can check the quality and the timeliness is available. put that in there.
I think as much as one can to get on it right now, I do think that's an important topic that, you know, maybe we should talk with you all about, you know, in terms of future webinars and you know, efforts to. Okay. Gotcha. I have the last question for you. One topic that's mentioned at the very beginning, right, is the standard business reporting, right? It's just the three words are out there. I don't think it comes back anywhere else in legislative text. So mentioned in a personal way, the data foundation has also been deeply involved in the fall for SPR, which must have been a European phenomenon in Australia and elsewhere. Tremendous. So is there an explicit mandate that's buried in here somewhere for the provision and collection of data that transcends the ways the data are currently provided in other systems, or is that a matter for follow-on legislation that's being talked about as part of the way of addressing data?
So I think that would have to be a follow. Like I said, this isn't really about changing what information gets collected. It is talking about the how of it, and the sort of this legislation is really thought of as creating a better foundation for our financial data. And so as this gets implemented, I think we'll want to see what are the challenges in implementation, what gaps there were, what new problems arise, and then with that sort of building blocks, we can move into something that is maybe a little more visionary, something that has a bit more, you know, I don't say these are very things, but a better sense of where we could go with this and what we really want to build. But that what the FDTA does is it roots us in thinking. It gives us the structure to start thinking about, to give us the data to start making those decisions and start making those implementations. So this was not like a backdoor way to get us to standard business reporting by any means, but it was a first and important step in getting us to a financial data system that can serve us better, that can help us make the better policy decisions regarding our economy, regarding fiscal policy, all of that.
That's wonderful, Corinna. Thank you so much. Thanks to you. Thanks to the Data Foundation for all the great work that you've been doing and for choosing to bring that to our meeting today. We actually have a lot to talk about in the future on this, and we look forward to it.
Wonderful, and absolutely, please don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to talk